Daniel had always lived a quiet life. As a linguist and cultural researcher, he spent most of his days reading, studying languages, and occasionally traveling to remote areas to observe isolated communities. He enjoyed the calm, the predictability, and the solitude that came with his work. But that morning, as he stepped outside his small cabin nestled at the edge of the forest, he noticed something he had never expected. A strange hum filled the air, vibrating through the ground in a way that made him step back instinctively. The sunlight seemed to shimmer oddly, casting fleeting shadows that didn't belong to any tree or rock. At first, he thought it was some kind of natural phenomenon, perhaps a rare atmospheric effect. But the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. His instincts, honed through years of fieldwork, told him this was something different, something not of Earth. Daniel moved cautiously toward the source of the sound. The forest was dense here, with towering trees and thick undergrowth, but a small clearing revealed a sight that froze him in place. Hovering just above the ground was a vessel unlike anything he had ever seen in books or movies. It was sleek, metallic, yet organic in shape, almost as if it had grown rather than been built. Its surface shimmered with colors that shifted like liquid, reflecting sunlight in ways that made it hard to focus on any one point. A soft light pulsed from the craft rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Before he could fully comprehend what he was seeing, a figure emerged. At first, Daniel could barely make out its form. It was tall, taller than any human he had ever met, with a posture that was both regal and commanding. Its skin glimmered faintly, a smooth texture that caught the sunlight in a way that made it seem almost ethereal. But it wasn't the appearance that struck Daniel most. It was the presence. There was a weight to this being, an aura of authority, intelligence, and something else, vulnerability. The figure stepped forward with deliberate grace, and Daniel realized he was staring at what could only be described as the alien queen. Despite her imposing form, there was an unmistakable hesitance in her movements, a carefulness as if she were unsure of how to act in this unfamiliar world. And then she spoke, a sound that was both alien and surprisingly understandable. "Am I a monster, human?" she asked. Her voice was soft, tinged with uncertainty, and it carried a depth of emotion that startled Daniel. He blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. The words echoed in his mind. Here was a being who could easily have been terrifying, who could have been powerful enough to harm him in an instant. Yet she asked a question that revealed doubt and fear. Daniel's analytical mind raced. How could a creature capable of interstellar travel feel such insecurity? And why did she turn to him, a lone human, for an answer? Daniel took a slow step forward, his heart pounding. I don't think so," he said carefully, not wanting to frighten her. Being a monster isn't about how someone looks, it's about what they choose to do. He paused, seeing her gaze fixed on him, studying every word, every movement. It's about actions, not appearance, and from what I can tell, you've done nothing to suggest you're a monster. For a moment, the queen said nothing. She tilted her head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost curious, almost human. Daniel realized that despite her alien form, there were elements of her mannerisms that were familiar, relatable. It made him feel a strange connection, a bridge between two worlds that normally could never meet. The clearing seemed to hold its breath. Birds paused mid-flight, leaves hung suspended on the branches, and even the hum of the spaceship seemed to quiet down. Daniel could feel the tension in the air, the delicate balance between fear and curiosity. He noticed small details about her, the way her eyes shimmered like liquid, reflecting the sunlight in impossible patterns, the slight quiver of her fingers, betraying the anxiety behind her regal posture, the subtle rise and fall of her chest as she tried to steady herself. "You are brave," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Brave enough to speak truthfully, even when faced with something unknown. Daniel swallowed. He realized that she wasn't just seeking reassurance. She was testing him, seeing if he could understand her, see beyond the surface. I'm just trying to understand," he admitted. "I've spent my life studying cultures, languages, and the ways different beings think. I've learned that fear often comes from misunderstanding, and right now, I think you're just trying to understand us as much as I'm trying to understand you." The queen moved closer, each step measured and graceful. Daniel felt a sense of awe mixed with caution. He had read countless accounts of first contact scenarios, most of them theoretical, most of them frightening, yet here it was happening before his eyes. And despite the potential danger, he felt a curious sense of calm. There was something about her honesty, about the raw vulnerability in her question, that made him trust her, or at least made him want to try. For what felt like hours, they stood in silence studying each other. Daniel noticed her subtle gestures, the slight tilt of her head, the way her eyes softened when she blinked, the faint pulse of light along her skin. It was almost hypnotic. He realized that she was more than a creature from another world. She was a being capable of thought, emotion, and doubt. And for the first time, Daniel felt that perhaps humans were not the only species wrestling with questions of identity and morality. Finally, the queen spoke again, her voice carrying a note of hesitation. "If I am not a monster, then what am I?" Daniel thought carefully. How could he explain the complexities of identity to someone who had lived in a completely different universe? He searched for words, realizing that any answer might shape not only her understanding of herself but also the way she perceived humans. "You are complex," he said at last. "You are intelligent, curious, capable of empathy. You have the power to choose your actions, and that is what defines you. Defines, not your form, not what you look like, but the choices you make every day." The queen seemed to consider this, her expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, a faint warmth spread across her face, a flush that was almost imperceptible but unmistakable. It was a reaction he had seen countless times in humans, an acknowledgement, a subtle sign of emotional impact. Daniel smiled, relieved. He had no idea if his words would fully reach her, but for now it seemed that they had made a connection, fragile yet real. As the day wore on, Daniel and the alien queen continued to observe each other. Birds returned to the trees, the hum of the forest resumed, and the sunlight shifted gently across the clearing. He realized that this encounter, unexpected and extraordinary, had the potential to change both of their lives. One question, simple in words yet profound in meaning, had opened a door between worlds, and Daniel knew that whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same. After the extraordinary first encounter, Daniel and the alien queen began spending more time together. At first it was cautious, both of them careful, unsure of how much to reveal. The queen, despite her impressive stature and otherworldly appearance, seemed almost shy when interacting with Daniel. She would observe him silently, her large eyes taking in every detail, the way he moved, the small gestures he made, the subtle expressions that shifted across his face. Daniel, in turn, found himself studying her, trying to understand her thoughts, emotions, and the alien culture she represented. Communication became their first challenge. Though the queen spoke a language that was unfamiliar, Daniel quickly realized that her voice contained patterns, rhythms, and tones that were not random. Using his linguistic expertise, he began to identify meaning in her words and expressions. He noticed how certain sounds were paired with gestures or facial movements. Slowly, a bridge formed between their worlds, a mix of words, gestures, and shared understanding that allowed them to converse. As the days passed, Daniel introduced her to aspects of human life. He showed her books, explaining stories of courage, kindness, and everyday struggles. He told her about the ways humans express love, friendship, and compassion. She listened with fascination, tilting her head slightly at times and sometimes emitting sounds that reminded Daniel of laughter. He realized that despite her imposing presence, she had a natural curiosity and a hunger to learn, traits that made her seem less alien and more relatable. In return, the queen shared stories of her civilization, of worlds far beyond Earth, of societies structured in ways humans could barely imagine. She described the challenges she faced as a leader, the responsibilities of protecting her people, and the burden of expectations placed upon her. Daniel listened, captivated not only by the exotic details but by the glimpses of vulnerability beneath her regal exterior. He could sense that she carried doubts about herself, questions about her nature and the morality of her actions. One afternoon, as the sun filtered through the forest canopy, Daniel asked her a simple question. "Do you ever feel afraid of yourself?" The queen paused, her eyes reflecting the golden light. After a long moment, she replied in a quiet, almost hesitant tone, "Yes. I fear that my strength, my decisions, may harm those who do not deserve it. I fear that I am more than what others can accept." Daniel nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. It was not power she feared, but the responsibility that came with it, the way her existence could be misunderstood or misjudged. He gently explained that humans often struggle with similar fears. "We make mistakes," he said. "We act out of fear, anger, or confusion. But our intentions, our choices to correct our errors, define who we are more than our flaws. What matters is the effort to act rightly, not the fear that we are something else." The queen seemed to consider this carefully, her gaze distant as if she were picturing her people and her own actions in a new light. Their time together was not without moments of levity. Daniel introduced her to simple human customs, tasting fruits, listening to the sound of running water, and even attempting laughter at his clumsy jokes. The queen, usually solemn and composed, would sometimes mimic his expressions, her attempts at humor surprisingly endearing. Daniel found himself smiling more than he had in years. It was remarkable to witness an alien being displaying curiosity and playfulness, so human in some ways, yet so unique. Despite these lighter moments, the queen's insecurities persisted. She often asked questions about morality, about the nature of good and evil, and whether beings like her could truly belong in the human world. Daniel responded patiently, emphasizing that identity was shaped by empathy, understanding, and choices rather than appearance or origin. He shared examples of humans who had been judged for their differences, but had proven their worth through actions. He reminded her that courage and kindness often outweighed fear and prejudice. One evening, as twilight descended, Daniel noticed the queen staring at her reflection in a small stream. Her face was illuminated by the soft glow of the setting sun, and she appeared almost fragile. "I am not human," she said softly, her voice carrying a tinge of sadness. "And yet I wish to understand them, to be more than a stranger in their world." Daniel knelt beside her, looking into the same water. "Being human isn't about where you come from," he said gently. "It's about understanding, compassion, and the choices you make every day. You already show those qualities. That makes you extraordinary, not monstrous." The queen turned to him, and for the first time, Daniel noticed a faint flush across her cheeks, a sign of emotion he had never seen in her before. She seemed touched, almost overwhelmed by the sincerity of his words. It was a small, but meaningful, breakthrough. For a being who had lived with immense power and expectations, Daniel's simple human perspective offered a new lens through which to view herself. As days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. They shared stories of hope and regret, laughed at small misunderstandings, and supported each other in moments of doubt. The queen began to show signs of trust, allowing Daniel to see her unguarded moments, admitting fears she had never voiced, and even seeking his guidance in minor decisions. Daniel, in turn, felt a growing sense of responsibility, realizing that his words could shape her understanding of herself and the world she had just discovered. Through these shared experiences, a subtle transformation occurred. The queen's posture softened, her expressions became more fluid, and a warmth began to radiate from her that had not been present at their first meeting. Daniel observed all of this with fascination, noting that understanding and empathy were powerful forces, capable of bridging the vastest divides, even those between entirely different species. By the end of this period, both of them had learned something invaluable. Daniel had glimpsed the depth of intelligence, emotion, and moral awareness in a being far beyond human comprehension. The Queen had begun to see that fear of oneself need not define destiny, and that understanding another being, especially one as different as a human, could offer insights into one's own nature. Their connection, tentative at first, had grown into mutual respect, curiosity, and a quiet sense of companionship that neither had anticipated. And so, in the quiet forest where worlds collided, two beings, one human, one alien, continued their journey of discovery. One question had sparked a dialogue. Many more would follow. But in this moment, the foundation was laid. The alien queen, though still unsure of her place, had begun to learn that identity was not defined by appearance or origin, but by empathy, choices, and the courage to face the unknown. And Daniel, the human who had first met her in a clearing of sunlight and shadows, realized that life could be far more extraordinary than he had ever imagined. One morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the forest, a sudden disturbance shattered the calm. Strange vehicles approached, and Daniel immediately recognized that this was no ordinary situation. The local authorities had received reports of unusual activity in the area, something that could only be the alien queen. She had always tried to move discreetly, but now the presence of humans with radios, cameras, and vehicles created tension that neither of them had anticipated. The Queen's expression changed instantly. A mix of fear and apprehension crossed her face. She had been confident in her knowledge of her own abilities and her capacity to handle danger, but the human world was unpredictable, and she had no prior experience with their authorities. Her powerful frame seemed smaller somehow, and Daniel noticed a subtle quiver in her hands. She turned to him, eyes wide with uncertainty, and asked, "What should I do? They will not understand me." Daniel, sensing the urgency, stepped closer. "We have to remain calm," he said firmly. "Panicking will only make it worse. I will speak to them. You stay with me, and trust me." He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He was an ordinary human, and yet here he was tasked with protecting a being capable of immense power, a being the world had never seen before. The authorities arrived, cautious, but determined. They had heard rumors of extraterrestrial sightings, of beings that defied explanation, and now they faced one in reality. Daniel could see their eyes widen as they took in the Queen's presence. Their weapons were lowered, but their posture remained defensive. The Queen, despite her usual composure, looked almost childlike in her vulnerability. Daniel stepped forward and raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "She means no harm," Daniel said loudly enough for them to hear. "She is not a threat. She is trying to understand us just as I am trying to understand her." The Queen remained silent, observing, and Daniel noticed the tension in her shoulders. He realized that this was a true test, not of strength, but of character. How she handled this situation would define her perception of humans, and perhaps his perception of her as well. The authorities hesitated, unsure whether to trust Daniel. They asked questions, their voices wary. Daniel explained carefully, avoiding exaggeration or fear-inducing language. He described her intelligence, her curiosity, and the fact that she had voluntarily allowed him to communicate with her. Slowly, he could see some of their skepticism giving way to curiosity. The Queen, observing Daniel's calm and measured approach, seemed to gain courage as well. At one point, a small misstep occurred. The Queen's hand accidentally brushed against a vehicle, causing it to wobble. Daniel reacted instantly, moving to steady it before any damage occurred. The authorities gasped, but Daniel explained it calmly, emphasizing her lack of intent to harm. He looked at the Queen, who met his gaze with a silent apology. Daniel nodded reassuringly. "It's okay. Mistakes happen. What matters is how we respond, not that they happen at all." This moment seemed to resonate deeply with her. The Queen had spent much of her life in a position where every action was scrutinized, where errors could have catastrophic consequences. Here in the human world, she was learning a new perspective, that understanding, Patience and empathy could diffuse fear and conflict more effectively than intimidation or power. As the day progressed, the Queen observed humans closely. She saw acts of bravery, kindness, and integrity from people she had never met. A park ranger guided a lost child to safety. A neighbor offered water to the authorities who had been working tirelessly. Daniel himself remained calm and protective throughout, acting as a bridge between two worlds. The Queen began to see a pattern. The essence of humanity was not in appearance or strength, but in choices made under pressure, in actions taken to help and protect. The authorities, having witnessed these interactions, gradually softened. Their initial fear turned into cautious respect. They asked Daniel how they could assist without causing harm, and he guided them gently, ensuring that the Queen remained safe and understood. It was a delicate balance, requiring patience, trust, and clear communication. The Queen mirrored Daniel's behavior, her posture relaxing, her movements becoming more fluid. She began to understand what he had told her before, that actions guided by empathy and conscience defined one's true nature. By evening, the situation had de-escalated. The authorities had withdrawn, leaving Daniel and the Queen alone once more in the quiet of the forest. The Queen exhaled, a sound that was almost human in its relief. "I did not know humans could be so courageous," she said softly. "And yet, they are flawed. They make mistakes. They fear what they do not understand." Daniel smiled gently. "Yes, but that's what makes them real. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting despite fear. And compassion is not perfection. It's choosing to help even when it's difficult." The Queen reflected on this, her gaze turning inward. She had spent much of her life thinking in absolutes. Power was strength, authority was control, and fear was to be mastered through domination. Here she had witnessed a different form of strength, one that embraced vulnerability, empathy, and cooperation. She realized that her own fears, of being judged, of being misunderstood, were shared across species. Understanding this brought a subtle shift in her perception, a gentle recognition that morality and character were universal concepts, not limited to humans. That night, as the forest grew quiet and the stars appeared overhead, Daniel and the Queen sat together near a small fire he had built. The warmth of the flames reflected in her shimmering skin, and for a moment she seemed almost fragile, a stark contrast to the powerful presence she usually exuded. "I have learned something today," she said quietly. "I see now that power alone does not define worth. It is how one uses it that matters." Daniel nodded. "Exactly. And you've shown that in every action you took today. That is what truly matters." The Queen's gaze softened, and for the first time Daniel noticed a subtle flush across her face, a reaction that felt very human. She had faced a test of character in a world that could have judged her harshly, and she had come through not through fear or aggression, but through understanding, patience, and trust. Daniel realized that this experience had bonded them in ways words could not fully describe. As they prepared to rest, the Queen turned to Daniel once more. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing me, for guiding me. I did not think a human could teach me so much about myself." Daniel smiled warmly. "You've learned from yourself as much as from me. Understanding comes from observing, reflecting, and acting. Today you showed the courage to do all three." With the forest quiet around them, the Queen felt a sense of calm she had rarely known. She had faced fear, witnessed human courage, and begun to understand that morality was not about perfection, but about choices. And Daniel, watching her settle near the fire, realized that this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge both of them to grow, learn, and see the world and each other through new eyes. After the tense encounter with the authorities, Daniel and the alien Queen continued to spend time together in the forest. Their relationship had shifted. It was no longer just curiosity or cautious observation. There was a quiet understanding, a bond built on trust, patience, and shared experience. The queen, who had once radiated authority and distance, now showed subtle signs of vulnerability. She spoke more freely, asked questions she had hesitated to ask before, and occasionally laughed at Daniel's attempts to explain simple human habits. One afternoon, while the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the clearing, the queen stopped and looked at Daniel intently. "I have never spoken of this before," she said softly, almost shyly. "I have always carried the expectations of my people, the duties of a ruler. I cannot show weakness, not to anyone, and yet, I feel so alone." Daniel listened attentively, his heart recognizing the loneliness in her voice. "You don't have to carry it all alone," he said gently. "Even rulers, even beings of great power, need someone they can trust. Sharing does not make you weak. It shows courage." The queen seemed moved by his words. She shifted her posture slightly, her hands clasped together as if she were gathering the courage to continue. "I have made choices, decisions that weighed heavily on me. I feared judgment, isolation, and sometimes even hatred. But with you I feel different. Seen, perhaps, for who I truly am beneath the expectations and appearance." Daniel nodded, understanding the depth of her confession. It was rare for anyone, human or alien, to speak so openly about fears and regrets. He spoke carefully. "Understanding and connection are what allow us to grow. By sharing, you are not only relieving yourself of burden, but also allowing another being to understand and support you. That is strength." The queen's gaze softened, and for the first time a faint blush spread across her cheeks, a subtle but unmistakable sign of emotion. Daniel noticed it and smiled gently. The conversation shifted naturally, moving to lighter topics. Daniel showed her small pleasures of the human world, the taste of wild berries, the texture of soft leaves, the feeling of cool water on hands. The queen, in return, shared moments from her life that were rarely spoken of. The first time she had led her people, the beauty of distant planets, and even playful interactions with her closest advisors. These moments revealed a side of her that few had ever seen, a combination of wisdom, curiosity, and an almost childlike wonder at the world around her. As evening fell, a quiet intimacy settled between them. They sat near a small stream, the sound of running water adding a calming rhythm to their conversation. The queen hesitated, then asked, "Daniel, why do you not fear me? Others might." He thought carefully. "Fear often comes from not understanding. I do not fear you because I see more than what is on the surface. I see your choices, your intentions, your character. That is what matters, not how you look." Her expression changed, a mixture of surprise and gratitude. You see me?" she whispered. Daniel nodded. "Yes, I see who you are. And that is enough." The queen looked away briefly, as if gathering her thoughts, then back at him with a softness that made Daniel's chest tighten in unexpected ways. She seemed flustered yet calm, an unusual combination that he found both fascinating and heartwarming. For the next few days, their bond continued to deepen. The queen learned not only about humans, but about herself. She began to understand that her strength did not make her fearsome in the way she had always imagined. Rather, it could be a source of protection, guidance, and compassion. Daniel encouraged her to explore emotions she had never allowed herself to feel openly: laughter, empathy, curiosity, and even trust in someone outside her own kind. One evening, as they watched the sunset together, the queen turned to Daniel and spoke quietly. "I have never known a connection like this. I thought that my world, my responsibilities, and my power set me apart from all others. But with you I feel understood, seen, not as a ruler or as a being from another world, but as myself." Daniel's smile was gentle. "That's all anyone really wants, to be seen and understood. You've allowed me to see you, and I'm grateful. That is a rare gift." The queen's cheeks flushed again, more noticeably this time, as she struggled to find words. For a being who had spent centuries mastering diplomacy, strategy, and control, this openness was unfamiliar and profoundly affecting. Daniel recognized the moment as significant, not just in their friendship, but in her personal growth. She was learning to accept herself, flaws and all, through understanding and trust. That night they rested near the clearing, the stars shining above them. The queen reflected on everything she had experienced in the human world: fear, curiosity, connection, and acceptance. She realized that she no longer questioned her value based on appearance or expectations alone. Through Daniel's guidance and the shared experiences of the past days, she understood that her true measure lay in her choices, empathy, and courage. It was a lesson that no ruler had ever formally taught her, yet it felt more profound than anything she had learned in centuries. The next morning, the forest was calm, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. The alien queen had made a decision. She knew that her time on Earth was limited. She would soon need to return to her people and her responsibilities. Yet she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The lessons she had learned, the experiences she had shared, and the bond she had formed with Daniel had changed her perspective profoundly. Daniel noticed the quiet determination in her posture. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. She nodded. "I am, but I want to leave with understanding, not fear, with clarity, not doubt." Daniel smiled, proud of her growth. He knew that their journey had not only been about bridging worlds, but about self-discovery, courage, and empathy. Before departing, the queen spoke to him, her voice steady, yet tinged with emotion. "Daniel, thank you for your patience, your guidance, and your trust. You have shown me what it means to see beyond the surface, to act with integrity, and to accept oneself fully. I will carry these lessons with me always." Daniel responded with sincerity. "You've learned them through yourself as much as through me. That is what makes it real. You've proven that courage and empathy are universal across all worlds." The queen's eyes glimmered and she approached him. "I will miss this. The simplicity, the honesty, the connection. But I will not forget. I feel changed, and I will return to my people with a new understanding, not only of them but of myself." Daniel nodded, recognizing the significance of her words. This was not just a farewell. It was a beginning, a transformation that would influence her decisions, her leadership, and her perception of the universe. As the spaceship prepared to leave, the queen turned one last time to Daniel. "I once asked if I was a monster. Now I understand. I am not defined by fear or expectation. I am defined by choice, empathy, and action. And you helped me see that." Daniel's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and warmth. He had not only bridged two worlds, but had witnessed a profound moment of self-realization. The ship lifted off smoothly, the hum of its engines blending with the gentle sounds of the forest. Daniel watched as the alien queen ascended, her form radiant and serene, carrying with her the lessons of humanity and self-understanding. Though she was leaving, the impact of their time together lingered. He knew that this encounter would stay with him forever, a reminder of the extraordinary possibilities that emerge when curiosity, empathy, and courage intersect. In the days that followed, Daniel reflected on the journey. The forest seemed quieter, the sun warmer, and the world richer with meaning. He realized that true connections, whether across species or cultures, relied on openness, patience, and trust. The alien queen had shown him that understanding transcends appearance, and that courage is defined not by power but by choice. And, somewhere among the stars, the alien queen carried these truths with her, no longer questioning her worth, no longer doubting her nature. She had discovered that monsters were not defined by form, that strength could be compassionate, and that understanding could bridge the widest divides. Daniel, standing in the forest clearing, felt a quiet satisfaction. He had witnessed an extraordinary journey of growth and acceptance, a journey that began with a simple question and ended in profound understanding. Their worlds were different, their paths separate, but their connection remained, a testament to the power of empathy, courage, and the transformative potential of seeing beyond appearances. In the end, Both human and alien had grown stronger, wiser, and more aware of what truly defines a being. The choices they make, the compassion they show, and the courage to embrace who they really are.